What's in store for the Toronto Blue Jays post 2024 season? We'll get into all that and more next.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for your first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. I'm your host, Braden Wasco, along with our co-host or whatever it is, Carter First. Our Twitters, Braden 5 Wasco, Carter First 2. We did do sort of a look inwards into our YouTube analytics or whatever. So if you guys are watching on YouTube, our subscriber to non-subscriber view count is just ridiculous. It's 85%. So if you guys wouldn't mind dropping a subscribe, that really helps us out a ton. And always comment what you guys think. We bring up different topics, sort of daily that you guys, we want to see your input too. We did a standings video yesterday talking about where we think the Blue Jays end up. Some people had some great thoughts of, maybe they'll be lower, maybe they'll be higher. So it was nice to sort of see what others had in their projections as well. Today, we really wanted to get into what we see going forward post 2024 season with these Toronto Blue Jays. We do have some great Joey Votto talk, just, of him coming to the Blue Jays. Also on his quotes that sort of took some shots at the Canadians and the, Toronto Blue Jays as a whole a few years back. So we'll get into that and the apology that he made and everything as well. And then, of course, some spring training news as well. We want to always keep you guys up to date and ready to sort of roll with all the information. But, Carter, I just talked for, it feels like 9 years. I know we were talking yesterday about our beer league game or playoffs coming up, and you said you had some stuff to, say about that coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy for our beer league situations because we're younger guys, obviously, but there's only about 11 of us. And some of these team rosters that had 10 players come to every beer league game, all of a sudden have 25 players now. So it's where do these guys come from? And yeah, some teams are 40 plus, but there's also a lot of teams that are around our age as well. So having these numbers advantages are huge, especially when, to say the least, I don't think we're in nearly as good of shape as we once were in high school.
Well, it's been a long time since we, actively played a real game of hockey. For me, I was 16 or 17 and whatever it was. And for you, probably around the same. So it's sort of crazy. I mean, I know there's some guys that went on to play junior and whatever, but for me, I obviously went to play some ball. So I didn't really have time to throw hockey into the mix as well, especially, with the amount of, with a couple of injuries that it came out of that. But yeah, this weekend, I'm pumped. I'm really not pumped to be, playing, like you said, against a 20-man roster for some reason. These guys are having a 40-man out here, it seems like. But yeah, it should be fun. We can get the social afterwards. I've already got some text messages from some guys that we haven't seen in a while. So they're coming out for the weekend and going to come to the social. Usually when socials happen in Bossier, where we're from, it's a huge community thing. It seems like every time there is one. So, and especially around St. Patrick's Day and hockey playoff weekend, it's sort of the place to be. So it's going to be a ton of fun. Carter, we do have to talk about what this Blue Jays team will look like post 2024. Now, what I mean by that is in the sense of if this team does well, where are we at? If this team does poorly, where are we at? And if we're somewhere in the sort of dirty middle, where are we? So I want to start off, if this team does well, makes it past the first round, and looks really promising, can you see this Blue Jays team going, in the next few years?
See, I don't even know at this point if we can say doing well counts as getting past the wild card round. We've kind of been in our window for sure 2 years now. This would be the third year in 2024. I would say 2025 is the end of our window. But in this situation, I'm assuming that we're making the playoffs for sure, obviously, probably top one, either winning the division or second in the division, getting that number one wild card spot. Definitely have to win the wild card round to be successful, in my opinion. But if this Blue Jays team does go to the ALCS or wins the World Series, I would love to see that, obviously. It's not going to happen. We'll have to find out. But obviously, you don't do anything. If your team's that good, don't do anything. There's no point. You have the skills, you have the talent, you've done it before. maybe have a little more playoff experience this season. I think that's the easiest hypothetical to think about. If this team is good, just don't change anything. They always say, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, so stand pat is what you're talking about, and I agree with you. I think obviously there will be roster moves that need to happen post this year because there are guys on lower term deals right now, and some guys getting older as well. And I think we made some good moves in getting some veteran presence on this team. And I think you're right. If we do well this season, maybe we don't need as much of that veteran presence because then some of our guys will have experience. So I think that's something interesting to look at if this season does go well and who's going to stay around and if they want to keep moving in that veteran presence, sort of way, or do they think, okay, now we have our guys, they've had the experience. Now do we bring in some younger talent that can maybe, just slot into some openings that this team will have in the coming year? Now, the next thing I want to throw to you, sort of the easier one. I don't want to go into the dirty middle yet, but let's say this season goes completely awry and either we miss, and I'm going to say it, if we miss playoffs, what happens?
Yeah, before I get into that, I just want to outline who is a free agent at the end of the season. And this is why I said that 2025 is probably the end of our window, because in 2025, like this coming up free agent class, you have Jano, Kevin Kiermaier, Yimi Garcia, Trevor Richards, Yusei Kikuchi, and then Justin Turner. None of these guys are like crazy impactful, I want to say. Like, obviously, Kikuchi is a very solid piece of this team. Danny Jansen's been great for this team. Justin Turner has been good his entire career. Nothing against Kevin Kiermaier. All these guys have done productive things for the Toronto Blue Jays. But when you're looking at it from a broad perspective, nobody that is like one of your core guys, your superstars, is really going anywhere after this season. So in that sense, it kind of gives us not a lot of opportunity to kind of blow things up if things go awry this season. But then that would be 4 seasons in a row if you're counting 2021, which I'll throw in here just for this example, that the Blue Jays have sort of underperformed. I mean, not winning a playoff game with this core is kind of insane to think about. And we were thinking about this perspective from 2021. So when you go into 2026, this is where we have a lot more free agents that are going to be gone. And these are key pieces of the team that may no longer be with us. And there's a ton of players here as well. So I'm just going to quickly rifle them off here. We have Vladdy as one of the main ones, Bo Bichette, Chris Bassett, Chad Green, Jordan Romano, Kevin Biggio, IKF, Tim Meza, Eric Swanson, and Henny Cabrera. A ton of these guys are instrumental pieces to this team. Obviously, in the middle of that order, you have Bo Bichette, Vladdy. Kevin Biggio has been coming into his own a little bit. Your closer is going to be gone. Chris Bassett's another guy that's going to be a free agent. Tim Meza, one of your most reliable relievers. So that's going to be the season where if this team has no success, things are going to change, and they're going to change drastically. I can see there being a huge blow up. Maybe the Jays decide to rebuild, not having the most promising prospect pool. But saying that again, if this team is bad this season, we don't make the playoffs, I think there needs to be a trade, because that's the only way that really things get switched up. That means moving Vladdy, as much as I hate to say it. It might need to happen. I don't think you're going to get rid of that George Springer contract to still have him for another few years. Jose Barrios, like, you could move key pieces like Jose Barrios and Kevin Gausman, but if you're expecting to be serviceable again the next season, it's tough for me to fathom moving on from one of these guys unless you're getting a boatload of prospects in return.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the fact of how bad this season goes. If it's going to go bad, right? If we're really bad and we're fighting the Red Sox for last place in the division, that's a problem. And then maybe they have to start thinking about addressing it. And with our roster not being as necessarily deep as we want it going, prospect wise, we might have to make that big deal to start, sort of rebuilding that prospect pool that we don't really have anymore. Because, if it comes to 2025, 2026 seasons, we're going to be just right out of luck. So it is interesting. I'm with you on the fact that I don't necessarily think that if it goes bad but not horrible, I don't think there's a blow up situation. But if it goes really bad, that's where we could start seeing like, oh my goodness, this might be a rebuild for the Toronto Blue Jays, because it doesn't seem like so far that we can win a playoff game. And that's something that needs to happen. So I'm going to throw at you my final scenario here. It's if we're in sort of the dirty middle, that, wild card, first round, we're out. Where do you see it then? Do you see that as sort of a success? Do you see it as a, we have room to build? Like, how many more years can we say, oh, we can build upon this?
No, we said this, I think, a few months ago, where we did like a brief outline of what we kind of thought this division was going to look like and what a successful Blue Jays season would look like in 2024. And for me, it's at absolute minimum ALDS. Even that for me is not enough. I need an ALCS berth from this team this year. We haven't seen any playoff success whatsoever. And obviously, if that happens again, I don't see Ross Atkins being here. He has no rap sheet to go back on and be like, hey, we had success this year. Maybe in the regular season, that's cool and all, but it doesn't matter if you're not doing anything in the playoffs. So at this point, I think that would almost be more frustrating for Blue Jays fans to see. Get all this hype up throughout the entire season. You're hoping finally something will change. And then if you get that again, a 2-0 wildcard loss, it's going to be tough for fans to get behind this Blue Jays team. There's going to have to be a lot of changes, whether that's just firing the manager and keeping your core together, or trying to blow up and make a big trade. There are a bunch of free agents next year that are available that we can add. And to be honest, I don't really see a scenario where this team doesn't make the playoffs, considering how bad our offense was last season and still what we did. I mean, we still made the playoffs. We're a wild card team. Obviously, we did want to beat the Twins in that scenario. Did have to go on the road. Would be nice to have a home playoff game to start, but we saw how that worked with Seattle as well. So we just need some playoff wins for the Toronto Blue Jays, and hopefully we do get some more success. But we always say this: it's going to come down to Vladdy having bounce back years, all these guys having bounce back years, and hopefully they can do that for the Toronto Blue Jays to be successful.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. That's where my head's at too. Is we got to win some playoff games, and it is frustrating because you get so hyped because you think the Blue Jays should make the playoffs and they were going to make the playoffs right last year. That's what we all figured. We all thought, okay, this team should make it. We did. We go to playoffs, and it was just horrible, and it kills you. It kills the momentum going into the following season when you can't even win a single playoff game. It hurts, especially against the Twins, a matchup that we probably wanted going into that series. Like, we wanted the Twins. We were like, okay, this is our best chance moving forward. And of course it wasn't. So it's very, very frustrating as a fan. And, I don't know. I don't know what to say without, being over the moon hype or trying to, be in the doghouse either. But it's sort of a make it or break it year, I feel like, for the Blue Jays this season. And moving forward past 2024, I don't know what the future will hold if this team doesn't succeed this season.
Well, I can definitely see at the deadline just how stacked this pitching is and how kind of lackluster our lineup is. Maybe we do get some successful seasons from guys like Ernie Clement, who's been unreal this spring training so far. David Schneider, we bring up all the time. Yariel Rodriguez, who we haven't really talked about as much as we expected to, considering we got that signing. I know he's been injured. We haven't really seen him pitch in spring training, so it's tough to speculate about a guy that nobody has seen throw a baseball in over a year. But there are like some good players on this team. Just another thing that I wanted to kind of talk about as well is looking at just some ages of players on this team, like just even the pitching staff. You got Jose Barrios, 29 this year, Chris Bassett's 35, Kevin Gausman's 33, Kikuchi's 32, and then that fifth rotation spot sounds like it's going to be Manoah, who I believe is 24, but then is he having success? That's a whole different story. So even with these ages, I know you have Kevin Gausman for another 3 years. You have Jose Barrios through like 2029. They're going to be up there in age. Are these going to be guys you want to move on while they're still good and being successful in the league? They still have some promise, or are they going to try to take a chance? And I'm not saying that Kevin Gausman is going to be bad in the next 2 seasons, but you might see, especially the Chris Bassett being 35, you might see a little bit of decline. And once you hit that decline, the trade value is going to go down drastically. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Blue Jays might treat this trade deadline, depending on how their season goes.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I think pitching is one of the aspects in any sport that guys can be a little bit older and still have success. So that's not as much of a concern for me personally, but I do understand where you're coming from of, these guys are all playing really, really, really well. And at the end of the day, is it too early if this season doesn't go the way we want it to maybe move on and think about some prospects? Because we're going to need them. We're going to need picks. We're going to need prospects. And we don't have that at all right now. Not anywhere in the sense where it would compete with the Orioles or the Yankees or, the Rays or anybody. It's very tough to look at. So that's going to be something very interesting moving forward. Of course, with a couple signings, we get Joey Votto, which is sort of just insane to me that we're talking about Joey Votto on the Toronto Blue Jays right now. But it's very cool. We do have a ton to get into just on him. where there's like sort of a bunch of aspects that we have to look at regarding him as well. So we want to get into that as well. We will get into some spring training news and stories coming up after the Joey Votto segment here.
Today's video sponsor, as mentioned in our title sequence, is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stats and projections and watch their winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. I know one thing that I've been looking at recently are some Canucks goal totals. The Canucks actually, we have a bunch of buddies. We're from Winnipeg. We always say on this podcast that are Jets fans. So I had a pretty good time watching that Jets versus Canucks game on that Saturday night with them winning 5-0. I did have some bets. I had Pierce Suter actually for a point, and he ended up getting that 5th goal. So that was one I bet on. NHL is what I've been sticking to right now just because MLB, I'm not like Braden. I don't take chances on spring training or just random all-star events. I kind of like to have a little bit more know-with-all when I'm betting and placing my money on some picks. But just download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit matchup to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit matchup of $100.
So I feel like we keep talking about Joey Votto, and it's because this storyline is so interesting, right? There's so many pieces that go along to it. First of all, I do want to throw it to you because you have his the contract details pulled up. Why don't you give us a little bit of a look into that?
Yeah, with Joey Votto, this is from Keegan Matheson. So the Blue Jays signed him to a non-roster deal, and it's for $2 million, and he can earn up to another $2 million via incentives. So that first $2 million is if he actually makes the team. And that second one will be based on random incentives, probably like home runs. You might have an OPS one, different things. I'm not exactly sure. The details haven't been released on that, but a very safe deal for the Toronto Blue Jays. An interesting one that I don't think any of us really fathomed, especially signing Daniel Vogelbach until we kind of had that tweet from Joey Votto. An interesting one, especially with the history with Joey Votto and Canadian baseball. Braden, I'm going to give it back to you to kind of break that down.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to start off with the comments that he made about Toronto and sort of Canada in general. This is when he was talking about James Paxton and around just sort of another fellow Canadian. So he starts off by saying, as far as Toronto and Canadian baseball and the country of Canada and James Paxton being a Canadian, I honestly don't care at all. And then which is just a little bit frustrating to hear, like when it comes to, you know, a Canadian talking down, obviously, towards not just another Canadian player. I feel like that's sort of whatever. You know, there's rivalries in baseball, which happens, but I think it's when he mentions Toronto and Canada as a whole that really sort of put a knife into a lot of Canadian baseball fans, a lot of young players out there. And so, you know, then he came back and obviously had a couple words, just, you know, trying to explain what he meant. He was on a podcast when he said this. He got pretty hot. He got a little bit relaxed, a little bit heated. So this is what he says. Clearly, my reply came out of a side of jealousy for a Canadian baseball athlete being celebrated in the city of Toronto. It was an odd reply and one I am terribly ashamed of. I go back to Toronto each offseason and feel renewed every time I cross the border to my home and native land. I would not be where I am now without the efforts of so many Canadian baseball people and the fans of Canadian baseball. So to me, I mean, I think I sort of do understand, you know, with all the media and all the podcasts and all the, you know, TV shows that come out and these guys, you know, make appearances onto. It sometimes is tough mid-conversation. You say something that maybe you don't mean. So I do get it from his perspective, especially with all the cancel culture stuff that was going on at that time as well. There was a lot going on, a lot of people looking for stuff to pick apart. I do understand that. But, you know, as a kid growing up in Canada playing baseball, I think if I heard somebody that maybe I looked up to at the time of Joey Votto, you know, this would probably hurt me a little bit as well. You know, seeing that baseball Canada doesn't get maybe the coverage that it necessarily deserves all the time around, you know, in the United States and et cetera, around the world. So, of course, I think this just was sort of like a jab that was a little bit unnecessary, especially coming from a Canadian.
I don't really understand the whole situation. I think it would definitely help if I watched that podcast and had a little bit more of a background. I know this was in 2018, so finding that podcast would probably be a little bit of a hassle. But just the kind of disrespect to Canadian baseball. I know there was some people on Twitter, actually, I was looking, saying that this was a response to the Blue Jays not drafting Joey Votto. I think
Yeah.
if there was that big of a grudge for Joey Votto against Toronto baseball, in my opinion, that is completely ridiculous from Joey Votto. You can't expect your hometown team to draft you. Like, you have American baseball players. There's 31 different teams that can draft you in America, and then there's obviously the Toronto Blue Jays as well. You can't expect to go to your hometown. I don't think that is true even, but I thought it was kind of funny that they tried to create that spin zone.
No, he did address it, and that was a little bit of the reason. He didn't say obviously that it was fully out that that was the reason why. It was also for the reason that he didn't get picked for Team Canada
Yeah, I did see that as well.
at
Yes.
the time. So I think there was just a lot of scenarios, and I think he had something with James Paxton as well during the season. So there was a few different things that I think he just talking about his Canadian heritage, growing up here. I think that's what then led to, stuff starts to come out on this podcast. He starts talking about, baseball Canada as a whole, and growing up playing baseball as a kid in Canada. And I think just eventually this stuff came out, and maybe just not in a great context. It wasn't great, but I think he was obviously a little bit pissed about the, not being a part of Team Canada. And then looking back, and then, you look back and you think, oh, well, I wasn't even drafted by the Blue Jays when they had a chance. So that's a little bit of a whatever. And then it's like also the stuff with James Paxton. So there's a lot of different pieces going on. I think he addresses this coming up as well. He then says, clearly my reply came out of a side of jealousy for a Canadian baseball athlete being celebrated in Toronto as well. He said that again. So it's just, that was one of those things that, obviously the jealousy was there, and he made that pretty abundantly clear. He said, I cringe hearing it because I'm so embarrassed by what I said. I feel very strongly that it couldn't be less in line with how I feel about Canadian baseball. And then he says, I don't care almost at all about Canadian baseball is what he ended up saying. And he says, at the time, he said, I wasn't really raised in Canadian baseball. And so I think that comes out of it as well, is that he spent a lot of his time playing baseball in America. So maybe at the time he was thinking a little bit, not so much as like a slight, but as a, that's not really what I did, right? I wasn't part of the Canadian baseball scene. I played a lot in America. So there was a lot to come out of this, I think, for Joey Votto. But at the end of the day, he obviously felt poorly about what he said, and he came back out and said that. And I think the jealousy thing was a huge part of it when he wasn't like the whole, Team Canada stuff is obviously, I mean, that hurts, you're such a huge piece, a Canadian player that's, future Hall of Famer. I mean, it's just, yeah, it probably hurts a little bit not being selected for that team. But at the end of the day, he let his words, take him into a direction of jealousy and whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about the whole apology. I watched the video as well that came out on Sportsnet afterwards. And yeah, it seemed just like a little bit, he was trying to just make up for what he said. It didn't come across so sincere for me watching the video. So, I mean, I go check out that video as well if you can find it. Just let us know what you guys think, because I really don't know how to feel about this.
Yeah, if anyone obviously has ever watched Joey Votto play baseball, you can tell he's very emotional out there and very passionate about what he does. So that could be part of the reason. Like, they might have been asking him some questions about Canadian baseball. Obviously, didn't make Team Canada. I think that was more so what it was based off of what he said compared to the Toronto drafting thing. I just think that part's ridiculous. But with Joey Votto, yeah, he's always been a passionate player. They probably got him riled up a little bit, and there was probably some little jabs that he was taking that he was still a little bit sensitive with. But with Joey Votto, I think he just, he got a little bit too in his own head, got the emotions, got a little bit the best of him. I think there was some sincerity to what he said, like his initial statements of like him not liking Canadian baseball because of that little bit of jealousy. But I also feel like he miscommunicated what he wanted to say. I think he knows he could have worded that a lot better. And I don't think he was like trying to completely slander Canada as a whole. I just think it was coming from a place of jealousy. I don't think he meant anything surreal and firm by it.
Yeah, and of course, I think jealousy is the main point. And when you get talking with friends or whatever, you get in that comfortable setting. Sometimes you just start talking. I mean, I do that all the time. Where it's just like my mouth's moving, and sometimes it's like I don't even think about what's coming out of my mouth. So it does happen to all of us. I just think it was not a great look for him. But I did want to also talk about, what he's going to do this season for the Toronto Blue Jays. So looking back at his numbers from last year, they are a little bit tough. Minus .1 WAR, 242 plate appearances, 14 home runs, 38 RBIs, 62 strikeouts, a batting average of 202, oof, a slugging percentage of 433, and of course, he's a lefty bat at age 40.
Hey, I already got the spin zone on that. I compared him to Ronald Acuna Jr. If you balance up those at bats, you compare the numbers. Joey Votto's on pace for more home runs than Ronald Acuna Jr., Jordan Alvarez, Vladdy, all those guys. Okay, but realistically, Votto's not going to see nowhere near those amount of at bats. At worst case, he is a guy that's going to be in the minors and can be kind of another just guy, like more of a coach on the bench, where he's got this minor league deal, not paying him a whole lot. But I thought it was funny how it kind of like for me, I didn't see Joey Votto coming here at all, like I said, after the Daniel Vogelbach stuff. But then we got a little bit of tweets and some rustling from a broadcast he went on. So it's from Buster Only, and he says that we just had Joey Votto on our broadcast. He is dying to play. He lives 25 minutes from the Jays Park. Could be a really good fit there. So with that kind of got Blue Jays media up in a storm and everything, and I kind of jumped on board of that as well. And the day before we signed Joey Votto, I was kind of saying how I thought it would be a good idea just to have him as another mentor on the bench. Wouldn't have to pay him that much. And it's nice to see Joey Votto kind of commenting on his approach this season. It's not seeming like he wants anything to be gifted to him based off of his career. And I'm just going to get into what he said as well. So he goes, I'm excited about the opportunity to work my way back to the major leagues. It's even sweeter to attempt this while wearing the uniform on my hometown team, the Toronto Blue Jays, as well as apparently Joey Votto called Ross Atkins personally about joining the Blue Jays as a non-roster deal. And the consensus they got from that phone call was this is pretty much a tryout for Joey Votto. And this kind of relates to what I just said before. He's going to work his way through spring training. If he has to start in AAA, he's going to start in AAA, kind of find his footing. And he's okay with that, which is, I was very surprised to see with Joey Votto's ego. I thought it might kind of come to play a little bit with this Team Canada baseball situation. But it looks like he's ready to kind of just pin his ears back and get to work, which I love to see. If we can see maybe a little bit of a Joey Votto resurgence like we did in 2021, if we can get half of that, I would love to see it from the left side of the plate.
Yeah, my only piece with that is everything we just talked about. Is it going to happen where maybe he doesn't put up any type of numbers that are great, and then we get the Joey Votto slamming the Blue Jays for not taking him, which is, with everything that we just talked about, is a possibility. And I think that could be an issue. So you invite this guy that's already slammed you. Don't get me wrong, he apologized, which we've talked about, for Freudian slip or whatever they call it. But then is there a situation where that happens again because we don't fully agree to signing him?
I don't see it. I think Joey Votto's matured enough. I think he kind of knows where he is at in his career, being 40 years old. He's got to know that he doesn't have a lot of time left. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised that if he got cut by the Toronto Blue Jays, if he just decided to retire. I think
Yeah.
for him, if it wasn't the Reds and it wasn't the Jays, he wasn't going to end up playing. It seemed like there wasn't a lot of interest in him playing either, considering that he was so openly tweeting about his wanting to come to the Blue Jays. So it's going to be interesting to see the little tryout between Joey Votto and Daniel Vogelbach. They're going to be doing pretty much the same things, not going to be playing a lot of defense, providing power from that left side. So I don't know if there's a situation where you have both of them on the major league roster. Maybe you start Joey Votto in the minor leagues, and then you have Daniel Vogelbach in the majors. Maybe you flip-flop that. Yeah, I don't see Joey Votto coming, like, slandering the Jays being a problem. And if he does do that, that's content for us. So I'm kind of all on board with this Joey Votto stuff.
That's great. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen either, but I think it will be an interesting series of events over the next, month or so. So, we talked about Joey Votto a ton. I don't know if we'll ever be able to say as much as we just did on Joey Votto, but hopefully, maybe
Hopefully
one
we
day.
do, yeah. Hopefully we're
Um,
talking about him hitting like back-to-back home runs, maybe having 15 home runs by
yeah,
the All-Star break, on pace for 25, something like that.
yeah,
That's something that I would love to see from the Toronto Blue Jays. But
yeah.
just before we head into our next segment, I wanted to shout out our Locked On 24/7 streaming channel. Last weekend, the NHL trade deadline happened. Crazy experience. Now the NFL free agency is open. Bunch of unbelievable moves today. My Panthers moved on from Brian Burns, which I'm a little bit upset about, just considering what they got back for him. But anyway, there is a perfect opportunity for you guys to get all this information from experts at our Locked On 24/7 streaming service. So just go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel.
And when we come back, we are going to talk about some guys that had good days in spring training, some storylines. The one guy we really want to get into is Ernie Clement. So we'll talk about him next. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for basketball or baseball or college basketball, you're going to want to have Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver you a consistent supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brand, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On. Of course, it's cool to see, all of us on there. Hopefully, you guys can tune into that Amazon Fire TV if you do have that device or that TV Fire Stick. I've heard it's really good. My parents actually have one. They said it works amazing. Locked On and you can check out Locked On and most of the big pro sports leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. Geez, it always feels like a bit of a mouthful, but it's a great service. I actually I'm so pumped because once in a while we get to actually see ourselves on TV. So I don't know if anybody wants to see this mug on TV, but it's there.
Yeah, that's why when we were talking about starting this podcast, you're like, camera version on. I'm like, I don't know if the people are going to want to see that. We might have to maybe go black screen instead. But so far, so good. Nothing too bad in the comments about our appearances. The only thing I'm getting flack for is this flag behind me. Eventually, I'll get to it. But for now, it's going to remain that way because I've been pretty busy with school and stuff. Maybe at the end of this week, I'll try to get a steamer on this thing, and then we can stop with the comments in the comment section.
Yeah, you know what? We've talked about how last week was a little bit nuts, just in the fact of us being both sick. But this week it's going to be just as crazy. Like, I think I'm working all nights. You got a ton of assignments and tests, and then we got hockey playoffs sprinkled in throughout this week. So it's sort of just it's been a whirlwind of a couple weeks. But I think it's going to get back to sort of a normal next week, I would think.
Oh, yeah. Next week, pretty much after this week until I get to exams, I'll be good. Because even for depending on what happens for our beer league hockey team tomorrow, if we lose, we have to play Wednesday as well. And then we got all day Saturday. So it's going to be quite the doozy of events. But before we do that, we'll kind of update you guys on the Monday episode about how that goes. We're going to get into some spring training stuff. What is going on with Ernie Clement? This guy is on fire.
Ernie Clement might be this year. Well, I don't even want to say this year's Davis Schneider, because Ernie Clement had a really good outing at the end of last year as well. So it's just nice to see him pop off so much in early of this spring training. I have his stats here. I can read off some of those for you. Carter, I'll get your reaction to them right after. He has 25 at-bats, 10 hits, 2 home runs, 7 RBI, batting average of .400. And Carter, I think you have his OPS. I'll let you say it because it is just immaculate.
Yeah, he's got over 1,000, a 1.143 OPS. And I even have a little bit of his last season stats as well. The problem with Ernie Clement is a little bit of his sample size. This season, only 25 at-bats in spring training. Last season had 50 coming in for Bo Bichette, but still had great success as well. A 380 average, 1 home run, 10 RBIs, an OPS of 885. This is a guy that has been doing, he's been, everything that we've seen from Ernie Clement since Bo Bichette got injured last season has all been great. And at what point can you say, I know it's only 75 at-bats, but what point can you say Ernie Clement is not deserving of at least a shot at third or second base? He's a decent defender, good enough to be an everyday fielder. And if he's hitting the ball like this is something the Blue Jays have been looking for all of last season and looking for it, especially in this spring training.
Yeah, you can't take anything away from this guy. He's putting himself on the line. He's playing well. I don't think that anybody could say that he doesn't have a shot at this second base or third base situation. And we've talked about riding the hot hand, playing who's doing the best, but it might be tough because we might have 4 guys playing well: Biggio, IKF, Ernie Clement, Davis Schneider. And then hope, if Espinal goes off here and there too, it's going to be just an interesting first month of baseball, I think, when the season gets underway, because we do have so many options right now. I don't know, Carter. I don't know who the right guy is or who the right pick will be to start this season, even though I still think, in my head that it's going to be, an IKF Davis Schneider start. That's my call for opening day. But the pace that Ernie Clement is going on, it is going to be very hard to make a case for him not to play at either second or third. Probably second, but
Well, and that home run he had today was off of Pat Eflin, who was in line to be the ace for the Tampa Bay Rays. I know he struggled a little bit at spring training. We can't really get involved with these spot starts, but he did go 3 innings for sure. I think I can't remember if he went to the 4th or the 5th inning, but he didn't have a good day. I know he gave up 4 runs. Gave up, this is a funny stat that I have just watching the Rays game. 5 errors in the first 3 innings of baseball. So that was a funny thing to see them kicking the ball around a little bit. Obviously not helping Eflin out too much. But another guy that hit a home run that we talk about all the time, finally getting a little bit of power to his bat, doing some damage in spring training, Davis Schneider.
yeah, and like we said, he maybe hasn't had the best of spring trainings, but he's a guy that I feel like he can be very good. I just don't know 100% where he's at, because he did have that huge slide at the end of last season compared to this. I mean, obviously, compared to his start, it wasn't nearly that. Um, but yeah, going into the season, I haven't seen anything that's told me that he's going to be unreal and lock down one of those roles. But also, I haven't seen enough for me to be discouraged about his season either. So he's sort of in that weird middle ground right now.
Well, they had him in left field today, so that's another option for Davis Schneider. He's been there a couple times so far this spring training. And with Davis Schneider, that's his second home run of the spring. If you can see those home run numbers go up, that's one thing the Blue Jays really need. The only problem that I have with Davis Schneider, and this kind of contributed to his slide of last season, was his strikeout rate and his ability to hit the high fastball. I know he was working on that this offseason, but it's still one of the hardest pitches to hit. It has the highest strikeout rate in baseball, that high fastball. You see Jordan Romano use it all the time for that exact same reason. So that's something he's going to have to get better at. We can't have a guy striking out 30% of the time like he was at the end of the season, just kind of being a black hole in this lineup like we've sort of become accustomed to, especially all of last season.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things in baseball, right, is make guys make plays, right? If you can put the ball in play, you have a chance. You have a chance for those bloops. You have a chance for those, sort of weird hits that you might get. But if you're striking out completely, not making contact with the baseball, you're just not giving yourself a chance, right? If bat on ball, hitting for average, that's what we need, because we do have those big guys that can hit those home runs right now. So if we get that Ernie Clement that goes in and hits 350, I'm going to take that over Davis Schneider popping a few over the fence once in a while.
See, we do need home run hitting, obviously, but we don't necessarily want solo home runs. We want these to be 2, 3 home runs, 3-run home runs, grand slams. We need runners on for our guys to hit runners in, because the solo home runs are cool and everything, but there could still be a chance that the Blue Jays hit 5 solo home runs and then lose the game. So we got to get some guys. You need a little bit of a happy medium. You need your power bats. Those are the guys that are going to win you these games. But you also need people to get on base for these power bats. Whereas Ernie Clement, and one thing I saw with Dave Schneider today, especially those two, and Nathan Lucas is another guy. It seems like their contact today was unbelievable. They were hitting the ball hard all over the diamond. And I know we're running out of time here. It's a little bit of a quick episode, but I just wanted to get into Nathan Lucas's stats real quick, because they're debatably better than Ernie Clement's even. A guy that's going under the radar, 24 at-bats, 12 hits. That's a 500 average. Is that good? You tell me. 12 hits, like I said, 5 RBIs, no home runs, but an OPS of 1,208. That is over Ernie Clement's. I know I wasn't too high on Nathan Lucas this upcoming year. And again, it's spring training. You can't read into that too much. Maybe he does have the opportunity to become our 4th outfielder. But seeing these kind of stats from our younger guys, our less proven guys in spring training, is definitely a sight to see. And it makes me excited for the start of the season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, where guys end up, where, who starts in AAA, who's going to start up top. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And I don't know, like I always say, I just can't wait for the season to start, because we can talk and speculate and do whatever we want, but until we really see this full lineup in full effect, it's really hard to judge this lineup. So it's going to be fun. We're getting closer and closer every day. We want to thank you guys as always for watching. And we'll be back rolling again tomorrow. So take it easy, watch some baseball.
Just before we send them off, I just wanted to bring up our Locked On 24/7 streaming channel one more time. You guys already know we'd say it pretty much every time on the podcast. Whenever you guys want to digest your sports content, let's go over to that Locked On 24/7 streaming channel. It's always going to be up whenever you want to view it. So head over there to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And subscribe to us while you're at it. Like we said, we noticed that 85% of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed. We appreciate it a ton. It allows us to know that you're enjoying the videos. And leave comments as well, likes, comments, anything you guys want to see that maybe we're not covering as much as you'd like to. Maybe we're not covering the spring training games as much as you want. Maybe you guys like these hypothetical situations. Let us know in the comments.